Cheers everyone, and welcome back to Joe's Metal Mancave vlog. It's a cold, rainy, just miserable spring day here in my homeland, and I figured it was a good opportunity to keep my spirits up. I'd finally get around to doing another one of these collection updates. As promised, we have a all black metal collection update this time around, and I hope you enjoy it, so let's get into it. Alright then, so up first, and already playing in the background, is Horna's Studentaival. Horna, of course, probably needs little introduction, as I imagine most people who watch this know who they are. But Horna is a long-running Finnish black metal band. They've been going since the early 90s, have several albums, EPs, splits, very prolific, and certainly one of the most legendary bands, not just from Finland, but really just black metal in general. So, Studentaival is the band's third album, originally released in 2001 by Woodcut Records. It's been re-released several times. This most recent re-release comes from Dread Records back in 2022. Studentaival is a interesting album, I guess we'll start by saying that. It's very much a transitional album for Horna, as it's the last album to feature Satanic Werewolf on vocals and the last album to feature Gorthar on drums. Both those members, not being original members, but, participants of the first couple or for several Horna releases. Of course, Satanic Werewolf went on to Satanic Warmaster full-time and has had a very successful career since then. Whereas Gorthar, he just sort of disappeared out of the scene after this one. And musically, this is very much a transitional album too, as it's probably, no, I'm very certain, it's the cleanest sounding Horna record ever released to date. So clean, in fact, that main member Shottrog, sometime after it was released, was basically like, he kind of wanted to disown it because it sounded too clean for him. It wasn't what he originally envisioned for the songs. And to be fair, yeah, it is a much cleaner and not even necessarily raw sounding black metal. It's a lot faster. The guitars are not as raw, and call me crazy, but it sounds like the drums are triggered too. And I don't, it sounds stupid for me to say this, I don't necessarily know what drum triggering means, but like, I kind of recognize it when I hear it, I guess, or whatever. Maybe you'll understand if you listen to it too, but very different from everything that came from Horna before this, but at the same time, much like the Satanic Warmaster releases that came around the same period, it's releases like this and just the sound that really helped establish the Finnish black metal scene. Obviously, the Finnish black metal scene throughout the 90s was oftentimes sort of intermingling a lot more melodic characteristics, or sometimes with grindcore and death metal, but in the early 2000s, I think the Finns really established their sound, which is oftentimes a raw black metal sound, but with that sort of lingering melancholy in their riffs and just a lot of melodic structure while still maintaining that raw black metal framework. Some people would probably say, like, oh, this is just a ripoff of Darkthrone or the Norse bands, but I completely disagree with that. It would be miscalculation to say that this is a ripoff of that. Is the influence from Darkthrone and Burzum present? Yeah, sure, but what bands weren't inspired by, like, Darkthrone and Burzum, Like, if you want to be technical about it, like, you can always go back to those bands, but I think it's just, sometimes you just see people saying, like, oh, it's just a ripoff of Norse black metal, and, okay, sure, fine, whatever. I mean, that's just my thought on that process, but, anyway, this album is definitely the cleanest that has been put up by Horna to date. And it's an album, like I said, they kind of disowned at some point in time, but it's very good. It's cleaner sounding, but it's still very good. Raw, mid-paced, and sometimes even often speedy sounding black metal. It's really good. Almost all the songs are in Finnish, of course, except for one song, which is called Black Metal Sodomy, and the lyrics are just as ridiculous as you'd probably guess by the song title. So, yeah, there is the front cover, and just to reiterate once again, this is 2022 put out by Dread Records. J-card. Yeah. Cool ass band photo from the era. Yeah, so after this album, I believe the entire lineup fell apart, save for Shawtrog, of course, because he's the main member of the band. But then the next album welcomed in lead vocalist Corvus, and eventually, I think it took a few more years, but they finally like established a little more of a core lineup after that. But this is, yeah, sort of the end of an era in a matter of speaking. So yeah, Horna, Studentalebal. Alright, continuing on, we're going to talk about at least one of the purchases I made at Metal Threat Festival a few weekends ago. This was something I knew I was simply never going to come across again, so I had to jump on it. I paid $50 for it, which is officially the most I've ever paid for an LP. I realize some people will definitely pay more, but not really one of those people. So the album in question is Knockvault and their album Land of Frost. So this album was originally released in 2003 as both a CD and LP version. The LP version I have here is limited to just 500 copies, and I simply knew I was never going to see it again, so I was like, fuck it, I gotta do it. Like, there was no way around it. But if you don't know Knockvault is a solo project from Tino Akotomor's Moss, who's most well known for his work in Nargarath as well as Moonblood, which is probably one of the most legendary and just cult-sounding, black metal bands, not just from Germany, but black metal in general. Moonblood, from I think like 94 to 99, they put out something like 18 demos or rehearsals, 2 full-length albums, and several split albums, and all of it's, super limited, really hard to get back in the day. But I remember, like, back in the early 2000s, like, I'd check eBay for that kind of stuff once in a while. You'd see these LPs from like Moonblood or whatever going for like $200, and I was like, who the fuck are these guys, And I don't know, early 2000s I had a bootleg version of Taste Our German Steel from Moonblood, which I thought was okay. I don't know, I honestly never really explored Moonblood too deeply, which, whatever. But in recent years, a lot of that stuff's been re-released by the vocalist's own label, put out basically compilations of like the rehearsals, the full albums, all kinds of stuff. I'm definitely getting around to it. But anyway, Knockvault has been Occultamor's more or less his main project since Moonblood came to its end in 1999. And Knockvault delivers sort of a black Viking hybrid. I mean, it's basically like the Viking era of Bathory, just kind of run through a black metal filter, basically. And it's very, very good. Sometimes the songs are just fast and pummeling and just, really brutal, but other times, or most of the time, it's more in that, pagan black metal style, or even sometimes it kind of goes into, more of a folk metal style, but not too much. I mean, it's always very much black metal, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but still with those other influences kind of sneaking their way in there. Yeah, I mean, the guy writes really good riffs. He's an excellent drummer, and it's just the great atmosphere throughout this record, and all of his recordings for that matter. One of the songs on here, Immortal Home, is interesting because it opens up with sort of like a metalized riff of like, I think it's like kind of like the main theme from like the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, the movies from back in the early 2000s. I guess if you heard it, you'd understand what I'm talking about. I don't know if it's actually the main theme, but it's a recognizable theme from the Lord of the Rings movies, and it's really fucking cool. Whereas, like, the last song, Land of Frost, is just a pure power metal song. It's really fucking good. Like, I was like, whoa, what is this? High-pitched vocals and everything. But, yeah, otherwise, though, you get, what do we got here? 5 other songs that are just pure blackened Viking metal. It's very, very good. Occultamore is just everything himself, other than a few guest vocalists, and some lyrics provided here and there, but really, really good stuff, man. So if you've never heard Knockvault, I highly recommend this stuff, man. I mean, obviously, tracking this LP would be very hard and potentially very expensive, but like I said, I wasn't going to pass on it. I just knew I was never going to see this again. So it comes in a white vinyl. And I got this from Metal Haven, which some of you Midwesterners may know was a Chicago-based metal store that was around for several years, and I think the store closed maybe 10 years ago already, but Mark, the owner of it, he was there selling a lot of LPs, and man, I mean, I could have spent hundreds of dollars more had I wanted to, but I was like, I gotta cut myself, I gotta be reasonable. But anyway, if you've never heard Knockvault, this album, or really any of the albums, are fantastic. Definitely check it out, Knockvault. Moving on, once again, I have to thank my buddy Deceiver from the band Nocturne's Mist. About a month or so ago, he sent me a couple cassette tapes, and now I'm finally getting around to talking about the second one. The album in question here is Ikur and their album God of Thunder, God of War. So Ecor is a Australian-based black metal band. It has a history. It goes all the way back to 1993 when the band released a demo. But it wasn't until 2018 when this album was released through Seance Records that the band had put out more material. I'm assuming the reason for that is two of the three members from this band also play in Nazul, and Nazul formed in the same year, so I'm assuming as Nazul probably took off or became a full band, this band got kind of pushed to the side. It became a side project, and it had just been sort of lingering there in the background all these years. So Ecor, if I had to describe this stuff, it kind of sounds like Nazul, just kind of, I guess, minus the highly symphonic keyboard parts. It's still raw, generally pretty fast sounding black metal, although there are some slower and more, I guess, atmospheric parts to it. It is generally pretty fast and generally just raw black metal, but just atmospheric and diverse enough where it doesn't fall into like sounding like some cliche, Norwegian worship or anything. No, it has its own identity, I think, and just heavily reverb guitars and the vocals and all that. It has its own unique sort of identity, and I really dig this, man. It's really great stuff, man. So there's the front cover. Once again, this was put out through Seance Records, and man, these guys know how to put out some cool looking tapes. Check that one out, man. I mean, man, you just don't see labels put out tapes like that. Fucking cool, man. But yeah, I really dig this stuff, man. So yeah, it features two guys from Nazul, as well as a session drummer from Nocturne's Mist, handling the drums on this particular recording. And it's really, really good. I mean, it's not necessarily a song that really just stands out and blows me away, but for like the 35, maybe almost 40 minutes that the album's last, it's just really good, really atmospheric, just raw, ugly sounding black metal. I fucking love it, man. Great stuff. So Ecor, God of Thunder, God of War. Alright, moving on, we're going to talk about Holy Grails, and the album I'm about to talk about next is very much a Holy Grail album, but it's an album I've had to settle for in a re-released format, but that's just fine. We all have our Holy Grail albums, and there's always various reasons for them. Some people will want the vinyl version, or some people will want a specific pressing on a particular label because the cover or the inserts are, this or that. But for me, it's just about having the physical media in my hands and be able to put it in my stereo and play it. And in some cases, that is very, very difficult because original pressings are just really limited and just really hard to get. So the album in question here is Fall the Leaf's debut album, Ever Sent, Ever Fading. Fall the Leaf and their debut album was originally put out in 1998 and limited to just 1,000 copies. I originally heard this band probably in 2001 and 2002, and I had every intention of buying this album, but I ended up settling for downloading a copy of the album off of Napster or some other file sharing network. And by the time I, sort of got in my head or what I realized that I needed and wanted to have physical copies or real physical copies of music, the album had become pretty cult and really hard to get. I would say for the past 5 years in particular, I've been really paying attention to this album on Discogs, waiting for a cheap copy to pop up. And every time a copy would come up, it was usually in that $50 or even $100 range. None of this was unfeasible for me to buy. I just didn't want to pay that much for a fucking CD. It's just ridiculous. I was just waiting patiently for this album to be re-released. And finally, earlier this year, Ardua Music from Spain announced a re-release of this album, and I was absolutely ecstatic. So Fall the Leaf is a Finnish, blackened, sort of melodic death metal band. And for what it's worth, I've never heard a band that sounds exactly like this. There's an extraordinarily unique atmosphere to their music. I guess on the surface, it would be pretty safe to say that this band is a melodic death metal band, but don't be fooled here. This is not simple In Flames or Dark Tranquility worship here. No, it's something quite a bit different here. There's this very sort of folk-influenced kind of melody to the music, and if you don't like overly melodic music, you're not gonna like this album. But like this album, it seems pretty obvious that these guys took influence from Amorphous' Tales from a Thousand Lakes and LGM, and they just took it to the next step, basically. So very folk-influenced melodic guitar work, but it's not, it doesn't fall into like that folk metal, genre. So don't be thinking this is like some, whatever. It's not folk. It's just folk-influenced riffs. You know, a reference point might be something like the first In Flames album, as you see a bit of that there. And there are some subtle black metal influences or some blasting parts, and the vocals could arguably be considered black metal, but for the sake of categorization, it would probably be just best to call it melodic death metal. But I gotta tell you, like, I've never heard anything that sounds exactly like this. It's just such unique and just memorable riffs. I mean, in particular, The Guardian by the Shoreless Sea is just, man, what a just beautiful riffs, man. Like, it's just, there's almost like this sort of like nostalgia built into all these riffs, and now the fact that I've known this album for over 20 years now, and just now finally getting in my collection, just there is nostalgia connected because I've just been playing that CDR all these years and absolutely loved it. But just really memorable stuff, man. I absolutely love it. I'm just, it's weird to me that it's taken, you know, all these years for this album to get re-released, but maybe the demand or whatever wasn't as big as I thought it was. I don't know. And I mean, there were times like in the past 10 years where I was like, man, I'm going to start a label just so I can re-release this album. But obviously someone's beat it to me, and that's just fine because now I'm going to start a label. But yeah, man, I just, from start to finish, it's just fantastic. Beautiful guitar riffs. So yeah, if you're into anything like early Amorphous or Insomnium or just any of that, just, you know, I don't want to say typical because this album kind of was before the typical, you know, Finnish melodic scene was established, but like if you like melodic metal, you will absolutely love this album. So Fall of Leaf, of course, is a very interesting album too, because, or interesting band I should say, because after this album they drastically switched their course. They, like a lot of Finnish bands too, went in more of this gothic metal style after this album. A lot of it had to do with the loss of their vocalists and just, I don't know, maybe they're just what they wanted to do. I don't really know the reasoning, but they went more of this melodic, gothic metal, dark metal kind of vibe. And I know by description it's gonna make people go, oh god, but it's actually really good too. It's not the same as this. It's certainly different, but it's catchy and it's really good. So I recommend just about anything from Fall of Leaf, but this is the cream of the crop as far as the discography is concerned. And it's really good, as if you haven't already figured that out by now. But yeah, just really memorable, just beautiful guitar riffs that have this strange sort of melancholic kind of, I don't know, it's a sort of melancholic nostalgia attached to them. I really dig it. And I thought one of the interesting thing too was when after I pulled the CD out here, there's a little bit of a writing here from Tanner Anderson from Obsequia, and after like I kind of read this and, you know, heard his little story about how he got into the band, it made a lot of sense where like his influence for Obsequia came from. It's very similar. That sort of, I guess, even like medievalish kind of vibe to this music too. It's very unique stuff. I mean, there's certainly comparisons, but I've never heard anything that sounds exactly like this, and it's just distinctively Finnish sounding. And all I can say is, man, I'm just so delighted to finally have this in my collection, and I didn't have to pay, you know, somewhere from $50 to $100 to get in my collection. So if you're someone that's been like sitting there on Discogs like me waiting for a cheap copy to pop up, then go to Ardua Music. It's a Spanish-based label. I actually got a little concerned after ordering this because it was officially, I think, put up for like pre-order back in, I don't know, late February or something. I think I made my order on March 2nd, and then it took like 45 days to get here, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, I got so much to the point where like I messaged the label. I'm like, I think my package is lost. Like, can I get a refund or, you know, send them back to me? But then like 3 days after I messaged the label, there it was. And it made sense after I arrived because they sent it in like the slowest snail mail imaginable, which I don't know why. That's really weird, but I guess financially it makes sense. So anyway, I'm just kind of droning and going on at this point. Anyway, Fall of the Leaf even sent Ever Fading. Fucking masterpiece. I'm so stoked to finally have this in my collection. Awesome album. Check it out. Alright, one more to close out this collection update, and let's talk about the latest album from Abigor, which is called Totschlager, a Saint Slayer Songbook. Man, what can I say, man? I've been a fan of Abigor since, well, as long as I've been into black metal. To me, they are absolutely, unquestionably one of the best black metal bands ever. I mean, top 5 for me, for sure. I mean, their old albums, Verwüstung, Nacht-Hymn, and Orkblut are absolutely classic, colossal albums. If you've never heard them, heed my words and go check them out. I mean, if you gotta stream them on Spotify or YouTube, just listen to them. They're fucking incredible. And I feel like this band has always been sort of underrated and kind of pushed to the side just because they're Austrian and they're, you know, they're not Norwegian, they're not from Sweden. They've always been, I don't know. I think it's silly that I have to educate people on Abigor in 2023, but here we are anyway. But so yeah, this was another pickup I got at the Metal Thread Festival. I had intended to buy this back in 2020 when it was first released, but you know, sometimes you just get sidetracked and you just, you know, things don't happen as you plan. But what can I say, man? This is absolutely one of the best black metal albums I think I have heard in not just recent memory, but the past decade. What's interesting about this album is it feels like it's very much a trip to the past, and it has a lot of the, you know, characteristics that made the original 90s Abigor so fucking good. And it kind of does away with a lot more of the eccentric characteristics that have characterized a lot of their newer albums, but still there's a minuscule amount of it, but it's just not so weird that you're like, what the fuck? You know? Yeah, so it reunites officially the classic lineup of Abigor, which is Thomas Tannenberger, Peter Kubik, and Selenius. Selenius has participated as a vocalist in the past couple albums, but it was just on a session basis. He officially joined the band again for this album, and for what it's worth, I would probably say Selenius is my all-time favorite black metal vocalist. I mean, there is no one out there, save for maybe Mortuous from Funeral Mist, that is more diverse, just more possessed of evil and hellish, just shrieks and just diversity to his voice. I mean, if you've never heard this guy, man, like, I'm telling you, like, you need to change that immediately. His vocals are so all over the place, but just so malevolent, evil throughout this record, and it's just fucking great. So yeah, this record does away with a lot of those more eccentric characters. It's a trip back to the past, but still very much through their modern, modern sound and what they're doing. And I mean, Abigor is a band that has always been very satanic themed, very occult themed, and they've never done anything to hide that. And I mean, unlike a lot of bands that, you know, as they grew over the years, they changed their themes. Abigor has always had very, you know, similar occult and satanic themes. And I think that's admirable because it means that, you know, they were really deeply invested in this stuff from the get-go, and they were not posers like, you know, like 90% of the rest of the black metal scene throughout the 90s. As for favorites on this album, I mean, what can I say, man? The first track, Almirad Rising, is fucking amazing. Orc Blut, some of the vocals and just the riffs are just so fucking good in this album. There's some like orchestration and stuff like that. It's just an immense album. I mean, it's so good. I mean, it's really like, and I don't know if the band would approve this, but it's very much like a headbang and just an energetic and brutal album, and it's just so fucking good, man. So it comes in this digi book, I guess is what you'd call it, right? Or hard book? I don't know, man. I love it. But it comes this, you know, lots of pages to it, very fancy and well deserved. I mean, these guys are icons of the black metal scene, and absolutely, you know, as I've already said many times in these videos, one of my favorite bands. And although some of that newer stuff is a bit weird to get into, I mean, I still dig the shit out of it, man. I mean, one of these days I'm gonna do like an Abigor, you know, my collection, whatever, show everything, just kind of go through my favorites and all that kind of stuff, man, because these guys deserve it. And as I kind of said before, you know, it's strange to me that I have to, you know, kind of educate people on Abigor in 2023, but goddamn, it's so fucking good, dude. So yeah, if you've not heard this band for whatever reason, like, fuck off to whatever other black metal bands you're spending your money on or whatever. Give this band some time. I mean, it's so fucking good, man. Abigor, Totschlager, Saint Slayer's song. Well, that's it, guys. I hope you discovered something new through this collection. That's very much the point of these videos. I'm always hoping to get people going on, you know, some new bands or some new albums they haven't heard. And if you haven't heard these, well, obviously they get my highest recommendation, and I hope you check them out. So thank you for joining me here in Joe's Metal Man Cave. My name is Joe, and I will see you next time.